Awesome. Okay, so I'd love to welcome everybody here to our 8th Wellbeing Wednesday, episode 8. And Louise Thompson and I are delighted to welcome Louise Scott as our very special guest chatter today that we're going to have a little conversation with. And we'll get Louise to introduce herself in a moment. But I would just love it, like we normally do, if you can just type in the chat box where you're dialing in from today and introduce yourselves, and we'll get cracking. The other thing I'd like to encourage you to do is have a notepad and a pen handy, because as with all of our guests, there's lots of gems that come up through these conversations from the guests and also in the chat box as well. So we'd love it if you to keep yourselves engaged and really take some things that practical from these sessions. And the best way to do that is actually to write some stuff down. So the Wellbeing Wednesdays, Louise and I decided when lockdown happened that we wanted to find a way to connect our network, and we do a lot of work with rural, regional and remote women. So we thought, yeah, we'll start this conversation. We know so many women with a lot of fantastic wellbeing wisdom to share. It's one of the areas that we work in very regularly as coaches and facilitators. And so, yeah, we've had a wide array of guests so far from all parts of Australia, and we've got a few more booked in the coming weeks. We're not sure how long this will last, but we thought we've got so many interesting women to talk to. We'll see how we go, see if you in the audience are still enjoying it. So send us your ideas for guests, send us your ideas for, perhaps topics that you want to chat about, things that are on your mind, how we can further support you through this challenging time that we're all in. And I think that one of the particular challenges that I've been thinking about recently is that this is a time of sustained uncertainty. So usually we have uncertainty and it might be uncertain for a bit, but then it resolves itself. Whereas this is going to be uncertain for a long time, and our brains don't like that. And it actually takes a lot of energy from us because we have to think really differently and be in an uncomfortable situation. So if you're feeling a bit sort of exhausted, it's totally natural for you to feel that. So let's just check in. Louise, who have we got today? Louise Thompson.
Okay, so let me just scroll. I'm just going to my bigger screen. So Amber from her phone, and maybe she'll tell me further down the list where from. Belle, hello, or Belle liked your earrings. And telling us that we look fabulous. Still getting to the point of Gina from Dubbo, which is great. And okay, so Belle's from Adelaide Hills. Karen from my favourite name, Karen Nankervis from Beechworth. And Amber from a particular station at Alice Springs. So Elk Hedgerow Station. Gee, I wonder how big that is. And good old Joe from Glen Iris, Anthea from Viaduct. Oh, wonder where that is. And Carol from Koa. Ellen from how do you pronounce this? Toanini. Did I pronounce that right, Ellen? Toanini. And Robin from Ben Warden. Sue Burgess, hello. Dialing in from Malvern East, not far from Joe and Glen Iris. Sue and I used to work with each other many years ago. Sue is at the Shire, the Shrine of Remembrance, and her and her hubby are involved in Echuca. We might find out about that a little bit later. Ooh, Angela from Charter Towers, and Elizabeth from Wongan Hills, which is 2 hours northeast of Perth. Oh, all right. She has in 7 of 8 of our Wellbeing Wednesdays. That's almost first class. Almost could sit with us in the pilot seats. And there's a few others. Wongan Hills. I've mentioned that.
Louise.
There we go. There's quite a few.
Yep, terrific. And yeah, great to see so many familiar names. Now, one thing I forgot to mention in the, just for those navigating Zoom, and I forget to do this all the time, is if you put your arrow to the bottom of the screen, you'll see there's some options. There's a chat box. And so we definitely want you to be chatting away to each other, to ask Louise Scott questions. You can ask them privately to just Louise and I by the Q&A box, but we find that there's a lot of value in other people hearing your questions. So type them in the Q&A. We will, and also, sorry, the other thing is the chat box. When you launch that, click on it and it'll appear on your right. Just make sure that you've selected, down the bottom there's 2, and make sure that you've selected all panelists and attendees, so that everyone can see your gold that you are sharing. This session is being recorded, and it will be posted on my website because there's lots of people who like tuning in afterwards, and we've got all of the recordings from our past 7 sessions. And your chat box is not part of the recording, so don't worry about that. There's we don't record the chat box, just the. So, Louise Thompson's going to be asking the questions today. She's in the driver's seat. But Louise Scott, I just want to personally say I've known Louise for many, many years. We worked together in the Department of Ag. We were working together on the grape check team. We were both facilitators working with the wine industry. It was back in the glory days of the wine industry, it was a really terrific role. And yeah, I've just kept in touch with Louise over many years. She's a very special person. The reason we wanted to interview her today is that she has had so much experience in her career of dealing with bushfires and dealing with communities in bushfire recovery. And so we thought that given that community trauma, the long-term nature of communities dealing with really tough times, we thought that that would be a really interesting conversation to learn from Louise about wellbeing in that context, because there might be some really valuable lessons that we can apply to ourselves in this challenging time. And the other thing not to forget either is that there still are many communities going through drought and who are in bushfire recovery right now, and dealing with those 3, the COVID, the bushfire and the drought all at once. So we don't want to forget those people. We want to keep that on the agenda. So over to you, LT.
CM. So Louise, and I will call you Louise, do you ever get Lulu or abbreviations of Louise?
Yeah, heaps of different ones actually, but I'm happy with whatever. Yeah.
No, I wouldn't say that.
I get mum a lot these days.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. And doesn't mum sound like mum, no matter whoever yells it out? I get caught in the supermarket all the time. Everyone turns around, oh, not me, but
yeah.
Well. All right, Louise, you're in the hot seat, and we've got a bit of a formula that we've been using over the past 7 and now into our 8th week with our Wellbeing Wednesday. And before we get into the specific questions, because of that really specific introduction we've used in our advertising and social media, there's a lot about you, and we just thought, look, just tell us in your own words your story. Who are you behind, let's say, all those role titles and even your experience? Let's just find out who is you.
Okay, thanks Louise and Synth. And it's funny because I don't actually identify very well with those titles. I don't see myself as necessarily a professional. My title at the moment is really long. It's Community-Based Bushfire Management Project Officer under the Safer Together program in Country Fire Authority. So it's actually, I think I'm different to a lot of people in the sector. So I guess my story is I grew up in a family of strong women. I'm one of 3 girls. My grandmother was a strong woman, a farmer, and mum is a strong woman, and grew up in a small community, so Tullan Vale, which is now, my husband jokes, on the outskirts of Melbourne, but the school had 60 people and it was quite a small rural school. There was no secondary school. We went to school in our gumboots, walked along the creek to get there, no uniform sort of school. And there was a really strong sense of community. And one of my earliest memories was Ash Wednesday as a small child, and mum and dad were both operational firefighters. And it's interesting, I've been listening and doing some research in my current role, but somebody did an interview and they talked about how amazing and incredible my mum was through Ash Wednesday, and how she offloaded us to someone who was a stranger, but that was what happened in small communities, or stranger because we didn't know well, but we became really good friends. But anyway, I think that was a defining moment. If a community is strong and they pull together, you know, amazing things can happen. So I was looking at what to study and went off to Dookie and studied agriculture and had a really good time. But a lot of that was about the friendships and connections as well. And yeah, so then I got my first job in animal health in Bendigo. That was a compliance role and I wasn't really particularly comfortable. But I always had operational firefighting roles as well. And that's where I met my husband. And he already had 3 daughters. So I've got 3 older stepdaughters, and then we had 3 more daughters. So we have 6 girls. And I think some of the barriers that I've faced, I don't want them to face. Cynth and I worked together in the Grape Check program, as she said, and in those days, things took a fairly deep dive, and people had invested lots of even their superannuation into the industry. And so one of the most valuable things I felt in that role that we did was run these seminars called Wine Industry Moving Forward. Cynthia, do you remember them? Yeah, where we help people understand their business. We connected them. We talked to them about mental health, and that wasn't really talked about much in the early, I suppose, 2000s. And yeah, so Cynth and I sort of connected, and I guess maybe realised we were different then. We didn't fit in a mould, and we were pretty passionate about these types of things. When that program wound up, I worked in a small landholders role with groups of, well, new and lifestyle landholders, connecting them. So I guess I'm a connector. And then Black Saturday happened, and I worked in some recovery roles with those communities, and I saw the value of just connecting people and getting them together. And then I guess the interest I had, there was drought as well in that time, but it was really about supporting people to, I guess, reduce their suffering, really. And then at one stage I got to have a conversation with Dr. Rob Gordon, who's a trauma psychologist, and he said to me, Louise, it doesn't matter how well we respond, if we get recovery wrong, that's what people will remember. And that stuck in my mind. And then there was an escape burn happen in the organisation I was working in, and I was actually in New Zealand sipping wine and in a motorhome with my 2 sisters at the time, and I watched it play out on social media, and the criticism of my colleagues and the department really upset me, and I thought, well, I've got a bit to offer in this space. So when I came back, I took on a role managing the recovery, and I guess that's where I've learned most about myself and about communities. Yeah, that's a really potted history of 20 years of
and
variety. Yeah.
And fast forward to today. So I suppose actually just on that last piece of what you've mentioned, what has been that critical piece of wisdom that you have discovered about yourself, given all that experience you've gained?
I think I'm willing to have hard conversations I guess for the greater good. And it was interesting, I actually burnt myself out in that role, and that's a common theme. And I had to do a lot of self-reflection and searching within. But I remember when I did eventually go see a professional, I went there and said, there's so many people suffering, I need to do something about that. I need to help them. And he said, yep, that's great, Louise, but first we might work on unpacking some of what you've been through. And I won't go into detail, but there was some pretty traumatic things happen in that role and in some in the past. And so I think realizing that actually, even though I was the helper and trying to solve the situation in some ways, I was putting a lot of pressure on myself to do that to the detriment of my own well-being and that of my family. So I guess it made me realize I do have strength and courage, but I also need to balance that with, you know, what's important for me.
Louise, what was the trigger? When did you know that there was something there that was worthwhile uncovering when you were working with the psychologist?
I think before I went and did that, I just thought, okay, it's something, yeah, there's something there, but it'll be all right once this slows down. So it was like a mouse on a treadmill, and there's this great picture I found one day with several mice on a treadmill, and then one mouse on their own, and then a tired mouse. And I, when I took on that role, it was meant to be a 6-week secondment, and then I was the last one standing after 6 months, 2 years. And I think I took my kids to the beach, actually. I thought, right, I'm going to have a weekend away. My husband was working, and I thought, I've just got to. And when I got there, my brain was super foggy, and it's too much information, but I had a rash, and I thought I must be allergic to something, but it was just an overload of stress. I'd been just running on adrenaline for so long. And then I had an interaction with one landholder, and who I was trying to help solve his problems. And it actually brought back something that had happened with another one, which was quite traumatic. And I started shaking and having a panic attack. And somebody actually said to me, "Are you okay?" And I said, "Actually, no, I'm not." And so, yeah, I think that's when it really triggered. But people had asked before, "Are you okay?" And I'd said, yeah, I'm fine once this is finished. But I know there's a little saying that you can't put your life on hold until you finish your to-do list. And yeah, I'd been so busy looking after other people that I'd really forgotten to look after myself.
And so how are you feeling now?
Yeah, actually, strangely, and I don't want to take away the bad stuff that's happened for people, but being in isolation has actually forced me to slow down, and it's actually forced me to, I guess, reassess what is of value to me. So busy people don't necessarily, for example, we have 20 acres here with, I've got horses, obviously from the picture, but Clydesdales as well, and kids. And I was so busy working that I wasn't really enjoying this place that we were working to pay the mortgage on. So it's been really good. And I think connecting with people, so Wellbeing Wednesday, other connections, one thing that's kind of embarrassing, but when I was in my younger years and used to go to BNS balls, lots of people have pulled out their photo albums. We thought there was no evidence of what we did, but there's a group on, a closed group on Facebook, and we're all reminiscing with these photos that we didn't think ever existed. So it's just connecting with people that I'd never prioritised and having a laugh, really. Yeah, we've been camping in the paddock, and we got a new dog, a failed working dog from South Australia, and she came over the day after the border closed. She got in the dog box at the bottom of a load of sheep, and yeah, she's been amazing. Yeah, so I'm feeling.
There's a lot to say about having like an animal or a pet that, you know, can be that can be the well-being that some people need, isn't it? So yeah, your photo, is it on Twitter, of the two horses, is beautiful.
Oh yeah, and it's funny. I used to hide things. I think, oh, my face is a bit. Well, that was actually after I'd watched a funeral on live stream, so I looked a bit ordinary sitting up here, you know, on my own watching it. But I went out there, and those horses knew, and they came over and gave me a cuddle. So they're the first one and the last one that I've bred. One's 14 and one's 2. Yeah.
Oh, gorgeous. So if anyone is now curious, they should jump on to Twitter. Is it only Twitter that image is showing the with?
I'm willing to share it. Cynthia can put it somewhere.
Oh, fabulous, fabulous. We might
I look wrinkly and old, but I think I've learnt to embrace my imperfections. I think I'm almost 6 foot tall, which you can't tell here, and I've always been really self-conscious. I think as a larger framed person, you know, and that kids are mean or were in my day. And yeah, so I always sort of tried to hide, and yeah, now just whatever. I am in my midlife unraveling. I don't care anymore. Brene Brown, if you haven't read that piece, do you?
Yes, isn't that great?
Yeah.
So what do we see in a day? What well-being practices pop up in your life in a day of Louise Scott's life?
I'm pretty reflective, so I do. My husband thinks I just sit on my phone and look at Facebook, but I don't. I read lots of things and look at lots of quotes that inspire me. But this time of year at our place, we get magical sunrises on our dam, and so I've been trying to get up before sunrise and go down the paddock and take my trusty Samsung phone and take some photos. It's just really about, I think for me, I don't know, like making the most of what we have. I actually feel we have this tiny little house, which is mud brick, and I used to hate it. It's cluttered and it's messy because it's just too small for all of us. But at the end of the day, like where I am now, this bit upstairs, I'm in here, my 3 kids are in there. It gives me goosebumps just thinking about it, actually. And we're safe while lots of people, you know, we've got space around us. These kids, it was funny yesterday, my 7-year-old, she just turned 7 on the 4th of April, so she was one of the first to have an ISO birthday. She doesn't want to go back to school. She's actually said, oh, I like you as my teacher, Mum, and this is terrible, but they can get stuffed. I'm never going back. So, but that was because she realised she's going back 2 weeks before her sisters. So my team has a daily check-in, and a few times I thought, oh, that's a lot, but it's really short. You can actually do it from anywhere on Teams, and it's just to ask how we're all going. And yeah, settling the girls into school for the day or trying, getting 7,000 interruptions. But connecting with people is a lot about what my role is. So I'm working at the moment with some really high fire risk communities. So helping them, and it was funny, I watched Kate's recording last night because I missed it, but there was a lot of talk about the word resilience. And yeah, so our roles are making communities resilient, and I guess that is really about connecting people and them understanding where they live and understanding the risk, but understanding what they can do about that. So my job is a lot about empowering people to ask those questions of themselves and their community. And it's funny, I used to really be one for I don't know what I was actually seeking, certificates or promotions or what, but I've realised now that my purpose is actually, it sounds very spiritual or a bit hippie, but it's really something greater than me, and it's for the greater good. So often there's political reasons why you don't get acknowledgement, or there's, and I shouldn't, well, it's called tall poppy syndrome, or people just don't understand the value of what you're doing. But one of the communities in particular has come back with how the work that we've done supporting them has made them more resilient to to, yeah, COVID-19. So yeah, that's really an amazing thing. So yeah, it's a lot about talking to people, really. And then I feed horses a lot.
There must be a few steps in that day as well, by the sounds of it, from the sunrise, walking down the paddock, to feeding and looking after a large family and a job.
Yeah, I think my role is quite different. It's really a change management role. So a lot of what I did on a day-to-day basis, it's not off the shelf sort of work anyway. So as long as I can still connect with the people that I need to connect with, it's actually, this suits me because I'm not, it sounds horrible, but I'm not having to travel to get kids to school, pick them up, get one to the bus. You know, I can put a meal on. I'll tell you what though, the house is absolutely disgusting downstairs. This bit here looks tidy, but I've worked out, and I've got a few props to demonstrate, but prioritizing things is just what I've had to do. People used to say, I don't know how you fit it all in, because I was involved with lots of different things. And reality is I wasn't really. I was not necessarily prioritizing the right things. And I spent Easter with a 4 cubic metre skip bin throwing things out. So yeah, I need to find time to do more of that, and headspace really. Yeah. I'm very sentimental. I don't like throwing things out.
Right, okay. Well, you know, we have memories attached to most things, don't we? So it's sometimes a challenge to let them go.
Yeah, that's right.
Now, I hear a lot of energy in your voice, and when I looked at your profile and what you've done, where does that energy come from? Because a lot of people will say in wellbeing, their trigger is they've lost their energy. So where's that energy coming from?
It's not always full steam ahead, and I learnt that the hard way. So I was fortunate enough to do, and hopefully Charlie's on here, but she might not, the Loddon Murray Community Leadership Program in 2017, and that was actually super life-changing for me. There were 28 of us that did it together from all different walks of life, and it actually gave me the courage, I suppose, to find my voice and to speak up about the difficult things. So there's been times when I've fallen down, definitely, but I've dusted myself off and got up again. When I finished that program, I was really full steam ahead, and I was advocating for everything that I thought was important. So I was on the Diversity and Inclusion Council, and I was speaking at conferences, and I was trained to be a peer supporter, and I was advocating for the community that was impacted by the fire, and I was, flat out. And it was actually somebody who's a member of parliament who I ran into at a field day or a market, farmers market, that I was working at. And she said, the thing is, Louise, you've got to pick a couple of things to go hard at once. She said, imagine being a federal politician and trying to advocate for all the things that you know need to happen. So I guess I've had to just pick a few things at once that and I guess the energy comes from seeing the outcomes. Like, I get really energized by getting, and it's not feedback as in praise, but seeing how, celebrating, I suppose, what's changed for people and myself. Yeah, I don't know. Actually, I've started walking again when I can fit it in, and I took the kids the other day, and they said, oh, we haven't been around here, and there's lambs and I thought, wow, that's something I've really forgotten to do with them. Like, when they're little and you're feeding them and you're pushing them in a pram and it's all just chaotic. And then the other day I was having a little bit of a meltdown, and I said, rightio, let's go outside and have a dance. And so I don't know if any of you are country music fans, but Chattahoochee, it's a really boppy song, and we were boot scooting and just being crazy. No one else can see us here. And the kids said to me, wow, Mum, we didn't know you could dance. And I was like, well, we could do a TikTok on this. So this is what kids are into these days. But yeah, so just trying to have fun now. Yeah.
That's great. I'll just put you on notice, Cynthia. Has anyone mentioned dancing at this point in time as a way of getting energy for their well-being?
Surprisingly, no, Louise.
Oh, okay.
And no one's mentioned boot scooting yet.
No, to be
So
more
I think there needs to be more boot scooting.
It's not real. It's just jumping around in cowgirl boots, really. But I like to think that it's a form of boot scooting. Yeah, the dogs think it's great. We've got a puppy as well, and they think it's fabulous. And the kids were laughing at me. I think they were totally embarrassed, but luckily it was only us here. And I think actually going back to what gives me energy, once I did find that courage, I've presented on panels for executives in emergency management. There's a course, executive consequence management course. And I reckon I've cried maybe 4 out of the 7 times I've done it, like choked up, you know, but pulled myself back together. And I guess allowing myself to be vulnerable, but to share insights that I remember when I did the leadership program and Di Bowles came and spoke with us and said the word imposter syndrome, like why would people want to hear from me? And at the end of the day, yeah, we all have things to contribute. It's just finding the voice to be able to do it. So I get a lot of energy knowing that I always said if I just help one person, then yeah, it's worth it. But yeah, I've presented now to 270 people, so at least in those executive courses. I think it's been probably career limiting, but I don't care really at the end of the day.
Career limiting.
Yes.
We might go down there shortly, but I tell you, I'm really, really curious about. It was brought up maybe in Wellbeing Wednesday number 4, Cynthia, but this whole, I am reading just from my notes, and it was also in the advertising. We talked about psychological first aid. Now, I'm assuming that part of when you've been helping all these people, I'm sure you're applying that. Can you just give us a bit of an overview of what that means? There was a lot of interest, wasn't there, Cynthia, about that when it rose?
I've done a couple of different versions of psychological first aid. So the first time I did one, I was actually lucky to do it with Dr. Rob Gordon himself, and that was a 2-day one run by people who had recovery roles. That was way back when I was in agriculture, but that one was actually focused on natural disasters. So it was he'd show us pictures and we'd look at people's faces and you could just tell, you know, that they were traumatized, frightened or whatever. It's emotional intelligence that one was really focused on. And then since then I've done peer support focused, I suppose. And a lot of it is about just looking out for others really and listening to them, but not trying to solve their problems, trying to link them. And in the first case, and I was interested listening to Kate, so I'd probably had that experience before about suggesting that somebody get help, and it didn't go down well. So it's actually, it's about identifying who's in their network or friendship group or family who they could call upon, I guess, in the first instance, and then professional help potentially as well. But yeah, we actually are wired for connecting with people and having somebody to look out for us. I didn't have that. I hadn't really identified someone who could say, actually, you've given me permission to tell you when I think you're not coping, and I don't think you are. You know, it might be time. There's nothing to be ashamed of. Like, we all sometimes need some extra support, and yeah, I tried a couple of different professionals, but yeah, I guess demonstrating, no one wants to admit that they're not coping or that they have an illness. You know, sometimes it's not an illness necessarily. It's, you know, you just need to talk to someone to work it through, and yeah, people are trained to do that with you. So
So if I hear right, is it a process of asking questions for people to kind of find that solution, be it the right person or an approach to take?
Yeah, I think one of the times, not long after I'd done this last lot of training a few years ago, was the anniversary of this escaped burn, and just observing. So a woman ran out, and I looked at someone and said, was she crying? You know, just, yeah, this is in the middle of a presentation and a morning tea. And I just stood with her for quite a while. She was trying to run away, just wanted to get out of there. And she said to me, I feel really silly. I didn't lose my house, but every time I go to the supermarket and have to buy eggs, it reminds me of losing my chook shed and my chickens. And every time I try to light my fire and the wood's wet and it's difficult, it's really, you know, it really upsets me. And just driving into the driveway, I think, yeah. So I stood with her and then eventually linked her up with someone to help her navigate her way through. It was insurance, actually, was the root of her problem. But yeah, linking with the right people. It's actually people in disasters and people who are really stressed sometimes, like, it's quite difficult, and we probably all can relate, but to make decisions, and you only see it with your lens. Sometimes you need to see it with someone else's lens as well as your own to work through some of those issues. But, and I guess another turning point for me, and they're actually on a webinar in 20 minutes with the Institute of Disaster Resilience, but there's two women in New Zealand, Jolie Wills and Elizabeth McNaughton, who did Churchill Fellowships on supporting the supporters in disaster recovery. And I was linked up with them, and I think Kate Brady from the Red Cross actually who did that. But yeah, they're two of my really good friends and biggest supporters. But their research just showed that what I was feeling and what other people feel in disasters is actually, it's quite, like, we'll experience different things, but it's quite normal, and there's a pattern. Yeah, there's psychosocial phases of recovery. So there's firstly the heroic phase, then the honeymoon phase, and then there's disillusionment, which lots of communities are in at the moment. Red tape, things are taking a lot longer. We thought we were going to be through this. When are things going to get back to normal? Well, actually, they're never going to get back to normal. It's going to be a new normal, and for some people it's good. Reconstruction and then growth at the end of the day. So potentially, yeah, I guess understanding some of those things, and I guess I've tried to share some of what I've learned from them for other people, to realise that, yeah, it's quite normal to have these reactions. So I guess that probably goes a bit beyond peer support, but it's more my advocacy for wellbeing.
Really adds a different level to wellbeing, doesn't it? So there's wellbeing for us, and then there's that understanding of, if we can help someone else or just be there, and as someone, I think Gina mentioned in the chat room that, you know, just creating space for a yarn, you know, you're helping other people's well-being. And I just think that we don't do it for a win-win, but I mean, that's even more for our well-being if we know that we can hold the space for someone to you know, to be heard or just to be present with.
Yeah, and the thing that I had the props for, I will do it when the time is right, or now if you like.
Tell me the question I should be asking you so that the props arise.
So the props. So this is just something about understanding, well, it's actually just understanding the load that we all carry. So this is a piece of Lego, but yep. Yeah, so we all have bricks that are not negotiable that we carry throughout our life, and they're things that are important to us. So for example, your family and your relationships and your health should be not negotiable, and we carry them. You can't, you know, get away from that. But then when we're good at something or we're working in a community, we take on a few more, and then, oh, she's pretty good, she's coping, we'll chuck a few more on. And that's all right for a while, but it could be just a little thing, so like the straw that broke the camel's back in the end. When you're carrying these for a long time, they can get really heavy. And then we look at someone and say, oh, they're not coping, we'll take them out of there, we'll move them into something different. But particularly when you're working in a role that you're emotionally invested in, you've got really good relationships with the people, you're doing it for the greater good, not your own ego, all those sorts of things. Yeah, rather than taking people out, we work out how we can take some bricks off them to lighten the load so they can keep going for as long as they want. So yeah, the bricks analogy is one that actually was like a light bulb to me. It's so simple. It actually originally came from Anne Leadbeater from Kinglake, who told Jolie and Elizabeth about it when they were researching for their Churchill fellowships. But yeah, that, and the other one that I like is, and it's ruined the book for many people, but who sank the boat? It wasn't the cow or the sheep or the pig that sank the boat, it was the mouse, but it wasn't the mouse. It was actually all the other things that had happened before the mouse jumped into that boat. It was a combination of all those things. So yeah.
Wonderful. And Cynthia has said first time for props.
Yeah.
I wonder in the chat room, who else has probably had a light bulb moment that potentially is the light bulb moment that they've needed about this layering and you know, taking on the heavy load, and not, you know, just take away one or two rather than just, yeah, shoving the person aside. That, I love that. That's great. And thanks for sharing that with us.
That's all right.
We'll go to Q&A in a few minutes. So you've mentioned a few people who, you know, you've been able to do workshops with or you've learned from. Who else inspires you to keep doing what you're doing?
There's lots of people. So I'm actually really into random acts of kindness, and I don't necessarily want anything in return or expect it, but now and then things just kind of come back. So one day, somebody who I've known for a long time posted me a book in the mail when I was not coping. So there's people that keep an eye on you who you don't necessarily keep in contact with or live in each other's pockets. So that person was Cynthia Marnie.
What that might be.
Yeah, so but there's plenty of other people. I think it's actually about collecting. I'm a real connector of people. So for example, there is somebody who I've just connected with. Her name is Tiana Felmingham, and she's written an article on LinkedIn. She's living in a fire impacted community who are now locked down for COVID-19. So it's not necessarily a sports person, it's probably less than likely a sports person. There's lots of people. I actually have a box here, which is another prop. When I did the leadership program, we all wrote to each other gifts of words. And
I'll just hold it up a bit higher.
So I've just put them in a box, but
yeah.
in this box is all these little words that people wrote to me about me. Sometimes it's actually really hard to see the impact you're making, and I just love doing that for other people as well. There's a term I found the other day, and it was about amplification, and they did it in the US. Women, rather than women saying something and men taking credit for it, which has happened to me, not just men, a lot of times in my career. It's about acknowledging who you got the idea from, so it's amplifying the message. And I'm definitely not a man hater, but I do think women have a lot to offer as well. We ran a program with women. It was a chainsaw course, and I had men saying to me, but we can't get funding for women, for men, so why would we? But it was much more than just the skill of chainsaws. It was about emotional preparedness and family violence and all the other things. I taught 20 women, it's my claim to fame, to tie truckee knots. But just seeing those women increasing confidence from the start, we provided childcare, and for some of them, one has 5 children, I think, and she said, I haven't done anything for myself. And she was a goer, and she said, this is life-changing. I've now realised that I have thought about other people for too long, and there's no stopping me now. So yeah, I'm inspired by lots of people in the community, really.
That's great. So what about you? How are you showing yourself gratitude, Louise? Given you do a lot of giving and a lot of connecting, how do you show yourself gratitude?
That's something I've had to work on. So I used to look for it outside, and I'm very hard on myself. It was actually the psychologist that I first saw said, Louise, I don't understand you. You push and push and push to the point that you should break, and then you push yourself a bit more just to see whether you will break. So stop doing that. And it's so true. And we do it. I think I've worked in male-dominated fields, and it was a defining moment, I reckon, when I was 16 and I was so excited. I worked in the local general store, and I just joined the fire brigade, and a woman in the community came and said, oh, how are you? And I said, I'm so excited I've joined the fire brigade. And she said, I don't agree with women on the back of a fire truck. I don't mind them making sandwiches, but that's no place for women. And this is like, I'm 42, 3, nearly 3. And that stuck with me for ages. And rather than saying, oh, okay, I'll quit then, I just went, well, I'll show you. And so I studied agriculture. I got a heavy truck license. I became a firefighter. I did all these things, and I'd never forgot that. But I saw her at a funeral or something, and had a cup of tea. And she said, oh, Louise, I'll never forget the day that I said to you, your eyes just, I broke your heart. And I still stand by it, because I thought the men, because they weren't used to women, would put themselves in danger to look out for you because they cared about you. But yeah, it was just, and this is only not that long ago. So, like 30-ish years later, having a conversation with someone who, actually, so I guess it's acknowledging what I've done and what I stand for, and looking back and celebrating, I suppose. Out of nowhere, the Zonta Club of Bendigo had a 100-year, I've forgotten I should have the certificate here, but a celebration, and they were desperate for me to come along. And then luckily I wore a dress, because they called me up for this award, the Community Award for Empowering Women in the Community, and I had no idea I was getting it. Yeah, so in front of all these people. Yeah, so it's recognition can come from, I guess, the most unexpected places. But yeah, I've had to look back, I suppose, and realise, I've done some pretty hard stuff, and at times I've thought I want to give up, but I've kept going. So yeah.
Good on you, Louise, and keep going you will, because we would love to ask you more questions, but rather than from Cynthia and I...
Run out of time. Sorry, no. I'm on a roll. I thought I'd run out of things to say, but there's so much more I did want to say.
Oh, it's just...
I'm actually going to break in and ask Fiona Lake, who was our speaker last week. Fiona's going to go straight to the point that Louise Thompson wanted to explore, but just was going to come back to. Fiona Lake.
Yes. Can you hear me? Is it working?
Yes, loud and clear.
Good. That's a bit of a miracle, because techie headphones and things aren't my forte. So what I wanted to tackle was when you mentioned, Louise, you thought it might be career limiting. And I gather that was when you were upset when you were giving the presentation, even though you were able to, get things back under control, so to speak. So I was wondering, and I mean, I can probably have a stab here, but it would be really nice to hear your observations on why you think that's career limiting, and what should change, and what can we do to help make it fine to get upset, because you can get upset and be professional in the same way that you can actually have a joke and a laugh and still be professional and do your job. So I'd love to hear more thoughts around that.
Yeah, great question, Fiona. And there's probably a few different parts to that. The first part of it is, I guess I was talking about things. So I work in a command and control based environment, and I'm pretty touchy-feely and pretty passionate, and I think you even said it, Fiona, yourself, that can scare people. I actually think differently, and I'm not afraid to give my views, but in a constructive way. But I think showing vulnerability, it's happened to me more than once in my career, and I've been pulled up for it. It was when I was in Great Check, I was sent to a course to talk about, you know, how to present in a professional way because you give too much away with your eyes. But I think, you know, it takes all different types. And what I've actually had to do is forgive people, because I think I've had the fortune, even though it's been hard, of having to overcome some pretty challenging stuff in and outside of work. And with that comes insight that not everybody actually gets to reach even in their life. And that was actually from the psychologist. Like, you've had these light bulb moments that some people never even get to. So it's okay. And putting on a brave face, like, mental health is such an issue in our communities and society. And I was on a webinar the other day where they talked about the percentages in emergency management, and I know they're in agriculture as well. So being able to separate yourself from your role, and yeah, I don't know. I guess I have to be close to the communities in the work that I do. Otherwise, I can't build those relationships. So at the end of the day, you know, that I don't actually care anymore if they don't like me. Like, you're not going to be everyone's cup of tea. That's absolutely okay, because I don't particularly like people that don't like vulnerability. I love hearing people's stories. And yeah, it makes people uncomfortable. But if someone's up there talking about a death or people losing things, like, it's the worst day of someone's life. Of course, you're going to be, you know, invested in that, and it's going to have an impact on your life. If you can stand up there and say that as a robot, then good luck to you. But I can't. And
so
I don't even know where the triggers come from. Yeah.
Louise, I'm sure there's a few extra questions to get in before we finish up with the time. Cynthia, what's coming through?
What I just wanted to make an observation that when the New South Wales MP Andrew Constance recently with the bushfires got emotional, he was lauded by everyone as, wow, what an awesome man, because he showed vulnerability and he got emotional, and wow, look at that great man.
Yeah. And some of the things that triggered me were out of the blue. Like, I said, you know, I put my life on hold and my daughter's pony died of colic as I was trying to drive back in a hurry. Like, of course I'm going to cry. Yeah. I'm only human. Yeah.
No, it's very, very interesting. Fiona, I'm sure Louise, do you have to go at 2?
No.
Oh, great. Okay, so just letting everyone know that just like in past weeks, we'll hang around afterwards to have a bit of a further debrief. So I'm sure we'll get more into some of these very interesting issues we did with Fiona last week, which was a great conversation. So I'm sure we will with Louise too. Now, so there's been lots of terrific comments just of support, Louise, for you and admiration. Just wondering, given out, which we'll share with you afterwards. So just wondering, any further questions, but okay, Charlie says, love your passion, Louise, and you've achieved so much. What are you most proud of?
Great question.
Wow. Gosh, in a career or a personal sense, Charlie, that's a hard one. Woo. I think, and Charlie would remember, we watched a TED talk on lollipop moments, and if you haven't watched that, TEDx Toronto, it's about when you do something for someone and you don't actually know the impact that it's had on them. Like, you could actually, just by being kind and listening to someone. Yeah, and so the other day Look, I get it all the time, actually. Praise comes from different places, but I guess what I'm most proud of, my daughters are actually displaying lots of similar things, and at times I've thought I've neglected them, I'm a terrible mother, I haven't, you know, been the mother that I thought I could be. But yeah, one of them became a Be Me, which was a Beyond Blue ambassador in grade 6 at primary school, and she's got quotes up around the place, like, yeah. So I think that's pretty, I guess I can't be doing too bad a job. Yeah, and from a horse perspective, the one that was cuddling in that photo, we bred him, and I won medals at the police and emergency services games, and then champion long reining at the Melbourne show with that horse. So I was pretty proud of that. Yeah, that was all in the time that I was in the middle of managing the recovery, and yeah.
That's great.
I've since had a terrible crash and not riding anymore, but at the time it was a pinnacle of my horse career.
Good on you. I hope you're okay if you had a crash.
It was pretty life-changing. Yeah, it's how I ended up in a different, yeah, it's another hour probably, that one. But yeah, it was pretty, it was stupid. I was overloaded. We were caring for my mother-in-law. I had stuff going on at work. I thought I'd just jump on and go for a ride. My daughter said, "Go for a jump, Mum," and that was fun until the third time, and the horse bucked, and I came off onto my head and broke my ribs, and still had to clean my mother-in-law's house out when she went into aged care. So I reckon there were implications for my career from that as well.
Well, maybe more on that after 2 o'clock.
Yeah.
Before we finish, your top 3 tips, or I don't even know if we have time for Fiona's top 5.
All right, I'll be real
last
quick.
week, but top 3.
Okay, so I guess one is the bricks. That's a quick one. The other one is what's your legacy going to be? You have to think about why you do what you do. So, you know, we're all here for a finite amount of time. So I guess that then you'll identify your values and keep on the trajectory even when things don't go so well. Network analysis, who's in your network and who's missing. So who's your sanity keepers, listeners, truth tellers, encouragers, but people that'll have the hard conversations. And then, yeah, just about the celebrating and having fun, really, because, yeah, we're only here for an amount of time and we don't actually know how long that's going to be. So celebrating and recognising your achievements.
Oh, that's a great list for us. Actually, when I think about, now this might be back to front because I don't have...
No, it's right.
No, it's right. Yeah.
That just made me think of my coaster, and Joanne Marriott may have actually given that to me. I can't remember now, as a gift. And correct me if I'm wrong, Joanne. But this is like group therapy for me on a Wednesday.
Yeah.
No alcohol involved, given it's day 10 of my cleanse. But these are the tips that really do help us. And as broad or as narrow and simple as they are gold. So thank you, Louise. Back to you, Cynthia, as far as wrap up next week's session.
Yep, thank you so much, Louise Scott. It has just been so wonderful to hear your words of wisdom, your reflections. I admire many things about you, and I've got a few tears springing up. Actually, tears springing up as I'm but you are passionate, you're heartfelt, you're courageous, you're very authentic. You do what you believe is right. So you've got so much integrity and courage, and you've continued to try to push in a difficult environment and make a difference to people. So I really value what you contribute to the world. Someone talked the other day about what's the magic you to the world, and I think you bring so much magic. So thank you for sharing that with us today.
Oh, thank you. I guess I had it written here and I forgot to say it, but Ruth McGowan was my manager, but Kathy McGowan, when we were in Canberra, said, if not me, then who? If not now, then when? And that's really been powerful to me.
Yeah. Great. great words, Kathy. Yeah, she's very good at getting people to really step up. I think she's terrific. So there's lots of thanks, which is wonderful. And just to let you know, next week we have another amazing guest on Wellbeing Wednesday, and that is someone Louise and I both know who's from Geelong in Victoria. And Dr. Paige Williams is a positive psychology psychologist, and she actually was, for anyone who attends the Australian Women in Ag Wellbeing Vacation Workshop and also the Red Cross fundraiser, she was there at those sessions. She's releasing a book called Anti-Fragile, and she's also been doing some research into rural and regional communities around this notion of well-being and anti-fragility. So she will tell you more about her in our email to you on Friday, but she is really amazing, so wise, such a great, I think she'll have some really great tools and ways of supporting us all with our well-being particularly during this challenging time. So Dr. Paige Williams next Wednesday. So hopefully we'll see you here. Let other people know about this session. Stick around if you want to have a bit more of a chat. And I'll stop the recording now, and we will see you next week for Wellbeing Wednesday.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye. But hi.